The proposed Atlantic Coast Pipeline, the ACP, will be a 600-mile fracked gas pipeline that will run through West Virginia, Virginia, and North Carolina. On October 13, 2017, FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, approved the project as well as its sister pipeline, the Mountain Valley Pipeline, or MVP. The majority of the ACP will be 42 inches in diameter, the maximum size of gas pipelines currently in the United States, creating a challenge that has scarcely been attempted and never done so through the fragile geology of this region, leaving many unanswered questions about the potential consequences. The pipeline will cross two national forests, George Washington and Monongahela National Forest, as well as the treasured Blue Ridge Parkway, Appalachian Trail, and several preserved wilderness areas. It will cross several river, stream, and wetland ecosystems, threatening water quality. It will require an estimated 38 miles of mountaintop removals and burrow through fragile karst geology. For pipeline construction, access roads will need to be created or widened, and the land for the pipeline will be clear-cut over 100 feet wide, with around 75 feet wide of the clear-cut along the path to remain permanent. This habitat fractioning and destruction creates opportunities for invasive species to take hold and further threatens endangered species including the cow-knob salamander, James spiny mussel, rusty patch bumblebee, and several endangered bat species. Beyond the negative environmental implications that the pipeline could have, the project poses extreme social justice and property rights issues, particularly targeting low-income communities, communities of color, and historic Black and Indigenous communities. The pipeline will irreparably impact landowners, farms, and other small businesses, tourism, and properties that have been in families for several generations, even centuries. With the Trump administration's fossil fuel-happy agenda and the majority of representatives receiving heavy donations from Dominion and other energy companies, communities are faced with an intimidating struggle to stand against this project. Since the pipeline was first proposed in 2014, awareness has spread, experts have spoken, organizations have taken action, and communities have begun to rally together. Even though FERC has approved the pipeline, there are still regulatory roadblocks and opportunities to halt construction. The resistance continues to grow.
Jack and Mary Wilson own White's Wayside, a historic property and community staple in Augusta County, Virginia. They are both actively involved in the community in a variety of ways and also work to build appreciation for the natural world around them. Since the pipeline was proposed, they have organized and hosted several community events to fight the project. On a business and personal level, they fight for what they believe in by sourcing local, healthy foods for their restaurant, help promote and support the tourism industry for the local area, educate customers, and are currently installing solar panels to power their business.
I'm Jack Wilson. My wife and I moved here about 8 years ago. We live in West Augusta, Virginia, in an old logging camp that's surrounded by the George Washington National Forest. 6.5 years ago, we ended up buying, by chance, an old restaurant called White Way Lunch. It had been closed for 3 or 4 years. We wanted to reestablish a neighborhood dining place, and we've been open about 1.5 years. The Atlantic Coast Pipeline is proposed to come through the National Forest, George Washington, which is the biggest roadless area east of the Mississippi. We encounter endangered species from orchids to bats to trees on a daily basis. I don't think it would be a good thing. The proposed pipeline would be about a 100-yard wide scar through these mountains. It's going over a hill about 100 yards from the diner. It's going to have a severe impact on our lives, our business, and our neighbors. In some cases, much more of an impact for our neighbors who are losing farmland, losing homes, potentially losing lives. My wife Mary and I have been to dozens of meetings, both to inform ourselves and to inform, hopefully, the powers that be that this is not a good idea.
Community activist Lee White led participants on a supported walk along the proposed pipeline path to bring awareness to and appreciation for what is currently there and would be destroyed by the pipeline.
Yeah, hi, my name's Lee White. I work out of Charlottesville. I'm with Seaville Rising, and the project we worked on recently was Walking the Line to the heart of Virginia. Walking the Line, it was a 150-mile walk along the proposed path of the Atlantic Coast Pipeline. Not the entire route of the pipeline, obviously, it's a 600-mile pipeline, but through the main counties where there's been the majority of the resistance, the pushback against the pipelines, from where the pipeline is proposed to come into Virginia from West Virginia through to Buckingham County, which is where the compressor station is proposed to be. We built it as a pilgrimage, you know, it wasn't a protest, it was a celebration of the land and the people that live there and the community, is just to get that out to a wider audience. You know, what was there would be lost if the pipeline was to come through. We didn't want to push back and do the no pipeline thing. We weren't wearing these shirts necessarily the whole time. We wanted to celebrate and bring awareness to what was there, but mainly why we finished where we finished. We walked to Buckingham County, which is the heart. So we walked the line into the heart of Virginia, it's a geographic center, but most importantly, it's the heart of this pipeline fight, because that's where they're looking to build this monstrous compressor station, which is the industrial facility they're looking to put in a rural neighborhood, a predominantly African-American neighborhood. The land that they're looking to build this compressor station on, Dominion and Duke and Atlantic Coast Pipeline LLC purchased that land for 10 times market value from the descendants of the plantation owners, the folks who were basically still inheriting the wealth from that plantation. And a lot of the folks that live in that community are descendants of folks that were enslaved on that plantation. So there's it's not a good dynamic. It's not a good situation where there's still, you know, this kind of white dominance, white suppression still taking place. And it's a difficult story because the folks there don't necessarily want to, you know, kick up a stink. They have to live there and play out their lives there. So that's why we walked. We walked to that place to bring awareness to this horrific thing which is potentially about to happen. This monstrous industrial facility is about to be dropped, which would be churning 24/7, emitting all kinds of, you know, not so good stuff into the atmosphere, right amongst where people live. You know, so they aren't just dealing with just the pipeline coming through, potentially, there's also the compressor station. The key to that whole thing, which doesn't get talked about, is that compressor station has been put there because it's on top of the Transco pipeline, the transcontinental pipeline which runs from the Gulf Coast towards New England. And that's the connector. That's what connects this pipeline, the MVP pipeline, and lots of other pipelines with the export facilities to export this gas overseas. And that's the story that doesn't get told by the folks who are trying to build it. Then, you know, the story, the narrative they try and control is that this gas is for domestic use. And it clearly isn't the case. You just have to look at what they're building. You know, the infrastructure they're building and how it's connecting with these export facilities on the Gulf Coast, specifically with a couple on the Atlantic Coast. And that's why we can't let it happen. It's simply for profit, to export gas overseas for shareholders, you know, profit. It's as simple as that. That's why we do what we do.
Community organizers held events to welcome the walkers along the way. At a brewery in Nelson County, the event included help with voter registration, the chance to speak with local candidates, informational resources, and of course, live music from a local band too.
How's it going out there?
Yeah, man.
Possibilities of tourist opportunities that we have here that will be lost because of this pipeline. And we are the sleeping giant. I'm almost grateful sometimes that Donald Trump was elected, because the sleeping giant, which is us, the people, is waking up. We are not going to put up with it anymore. We have to remember that they might have money, but we have the votes. We have the power to elect the people that are going to make the changes in government. That's what we're doing right now. It's getting together, it's mobilizing, it's keeping the issue up front in people's faces, talking about it, pressuring our governor. That governor will be able to sign legislation that says it will be affecting our water quality. It is not a done deal, and we have to not let them convince us that it is.
I'm about to explain what's going on here. It's a little song that I composed a while back, and I hope you enjoy it. And you can join in the chorus if you're so inclined. If not, I'll steal the show. All right. They want to build a pipeline through our land to bring frack gas from somewhere to the west. But we're gonna monkey wrench their plan, no matter how much money they invest. P-I-P-E-L-I-N-E-E. That is how you spell pipeline. P-I-P-E-L-I-N-E-E. Keep it off this land of yours and mine. Didn't say we wouldn't hurt anymore, that's how you run.
The other day we hiked like 7 miles up and down Hankey Mountain, and the pipeline's proposed to come like around the middle of Hankey Mountain. It's a wilderness area, but it's on the edge of a wilderness area, and there's nothing there. You know, right. It's like it's just be decimated by this thing coming through. Right. You know, it's just crazy. But even like the kind of the people that will be impacted. Deerfield was the biggest impact for me. The town of Deerfield, that's little village of Deerfield. It's all their water comes from the spring. Yeah. There's a community spring in the middle. We kind of a little kind of circle gathering on the morning about, and we all shared a little bit. The proposed route comes up, crosses the road like just south of the town, swings around the town, across the field next to it, and it crosses the road just north of the town. And that town gets its water from this mountain spring. Right. And the recharge area for that water is like 11,000 acres. There was a study done recently, but 11,000 acres the water comes from. The Shenandoah Mountains on one side, you know, and another ridge, I forget what it's called right now, on the other side, and all the water comes down.
Blue Ridge Environmental Defense League, Bradle, held a No Pipeline tour where they planned events with local communities across Virginia that are being affected by the ACP and MVP. They invited the public and media to tour areas and hear from residents being affected by the pipelines. Bradle brought a mock compressor station along and toured with speaker, educator, grassroots organizer, and environmental activist Lois Gibbs, who is known for the Love Canal story and as the mother of Superfund.
The real compressor station would be big as your average super Walmart. That big a building, that much floor space is what a compressor has. And it would have in it 4 turbines powered by natural gas, emitting a certain amount of formaldehyde, nitrogen oxides, hexane, and myriad other toxic air pollution compounds. So that's why we have the smokestack here, and we have simulated the emissions. The reason I chose 55 decibels is because this is what the county of Buckingham says is okay. The noise that you heard at 55 decibels applies only 90% of the time. Right. So for 365 days of a year, 10% of the time would be 36.5 days. That's 876 hours where there is virtually no limit. And if the limit and the level of sound pollution that could occur at that time would certainly drive you out of this parking lot.
And that noise, you're living that noise the rest of your life. You know, in Pennsylvania, the compressor stations like that, the cattle, dairy cattle around it stopped producing milk because of the noise and the vibration. The horses that they had to stop breeding them because they got so jittery that nobody was going to buy a horse from them. No one could ride those horses. People have all these diseases from the noise and the vibrations and the irritation and the stress. So there's a lot of problems with the compressor station. There's a lot with the pipeline. And the last thing with the pipeline is, just in case you didn't know, is if the pipeline explodes, it is 1,100 feet on either side of the pipeline that will blow up with it. 1,100 feet. And no firefighter can touch it. The firefighters are instructed to maintain a safety perimeter around it. They are not going to put it out because they cannot put it out. The only way the pipeline fire can be put out is after they turn off the gas. Only people qualified and have authority to turn off the gas and turn it off. Well, in many places it's right next to people's homes, next to people's places of worship. What they're trying to do, especially with the compressor station in this community, is about environmental justice, or injustice as the case may be. They've chosen this community for a reason. They've chosen this community because there's not a lot of wealth and because there is a lot of people of color. This is not unusual. This is what they do. I've been doing this work for almost 40 years now, and the vast majority of the communities I go to and work with are communities who have lower wealth and are of color. And this is a deliberate, intentful, you know, it is a tactic, but it's really worse than that, right? Because it's like, it's picking communities and say, you are the most vulnerable, and therefore, because you're so vulnerable, I'm going to take you down. I'm going to put anything I want there. Because they don't think you're worth protecting or you're worth having a peaceful life. How dare they? They don't get to make that decision. They don't get to make that decision.
More recently, as the pipeline has become more of a reality, communities are discussing next steps. In Nelson and Buckingham counties, direct action training camps have been held to introduce and educate pipeline opposers about nonviolent direct action and civil disobedience tactics and organizing. Joined by water protectors from Standing Rock, Black Lives Matter, environmental coalitions, and student activists, community members are exploring new and creative ways to make their voices heard.
Richard and Jill Averett purchased a large property in Nelson County, Virginia, with dreams of building an eco-resort, an environmentally friendly place where people can soak in the beauty of the surrounding Blue Ridge Mountains. Shortly thereafter, they received a notice from Dominion about the proposed ACP, which would run right through their land, a project in complete opposition to everything they envisioned for their oasis.
My name is Richard Averett. I am representing my family and a little LLC we have called Rockfish Valley Investments that owns this piece of property. This is a 100-acre parcel that we bought as a family in 2013 with the idea of celebrating what's so beautiful and magnificent about the Rockfish Valley, this part of Nelson County that we live in. And we began designing a really sort of a cabin-centric eco boutique resort here that would specifically be celebrating what you see around us. And then we got 2 years into that process, and in 2015, Dominion and the ACP showed up and said they wanted to put a 42-inch natural gas pipeline through the dead center of it, cutting down thousands of trees, digging up the creek, leveling the land, and basically irreparably damaging the property for all time. As a landowner, you find yourself sort of lost in this extraordinary fight to protect your land, both for yourself and for your community. And this was an opportunity to bring together people from all over the three-state region or so to consider what are all of the things we can do together, what strategies can we employ to stop this destruction, not just here, but in other places. There are hundreds of these projects going on all over the country, and we deserve better than this. And so this was an opportunity to tap in to all of that energy from people who are willing to stand with us as landowners, even though they're not directly affected, for a better future for all of us.
Communities and organizations have conducted pipeline tours, attended public hearings, protested, commissioned field research and environmental surveys, engaged with local media, appealed to their representatives in regulatory agencies, filed lawsuits, helped educate and create awareness, and more.
The best part of what we've experienced in the 3 or 4 years since Atlantic Coast Pipeline was proposed are the grassroots organization that's come about. I've met a lot of awesome people that I would not have met otherwise.
Okay, if it were not for the pipeline, I would have never known anything about you.
You know, it seems extraordinary cliche to talk about how these hard times always bring a community together, and there's something that's frustrating about that, right? That we should be together anyway. What I have seen in this process, however, is just that we have all walks of life, people who would identify as conservative, who centrists, libertarians, anarchists, liberals, all sorts coming together around this issue of these pipelines, because at their face value, they are so clearly wrong for so many reasons. And that's a beautiful thing. Everyone taps into their own expertise and their own skills to say, here's a way that I can impact this fight. And then the community rallies to support that. And it's been quite spectacular to witness.
Yeah, I think it's definitely brought people who would never have come into contact with each other in different counties and in the local towns into contact. You know, everybody initially was operating in their own space, you know, because that's what we do. We just start talking to the people close by and formulating groups and networks. But that is, you know, as time has gone on and seen the difference from then to now, where there's, you know, huge communication going on between different groups, and people, you know, with the same, working on the same agenda, I guess. Whether it be they're coming at it from a eminent domain perspective, you know, this is my property, you've got no business coming through my property, or it's, you know, folks who are completely focused on the environmental concerns, you know, global climate change, that kind of stuff. Folks are working hand in hand. You know, whether they would be labeled, you know, by society generally as left or right, Republican or Democrat. I mean, we're talking about human beings, and that's the beautiful thing about this, is that there's people who are just human beings who are concerned. It's just people saying, hey, hold on, this isn't right. You know, a for-profit corporation shouldn't be allowed to just take and destroy. You know, so that's seeing those people coming together is a beautiful thing. You know, it's pretty cool to be a part of it, and see that there's people just rising, you know, rising on up.
Here in West Augusta and at White's Wayside, we are the gateway to Highland County and the Allegheny Highlands. The Highlands were, in my view, fortunate not to have coal. They have not been strip mined. There's no railroad going through. The logging happened, but the trees have come back. It is one of the most beautiful, undamaged areas in the United States. And there's very little of that. I don't see any reason in harming the last tiny remaining section of the East. These are splendid natural lands that are just not seen. And to permanently scar and risk these areas for a fossil fuel pipeline that is not needed or does not serve Virginia is inexcusable.
and you come here and you live in these mountains, the Blue Ridge Mountains, and you just spend a lot of time in them. Places like the Appalachian Trail, Shenandoah National Park, the Blue Ridge Parkway, and the towns around here, you just can't comprehend the destruction that would happen if the 125, 150 foot wide kind of corridor would be just plowed through these mountains. But what drives me as far as the organisation we formed in Charlottesville is wider kind of planetary issues as well. This pipeline is one pipeline in a whole raft of a huge expansion of fossil fuel infrastructure. That if they were all built, all these pipelines, there's something like 25 pipeline projects on the East Coast alone, either being built or about to be built, and all the export facilities that would being kind of turned around to send this frack gas overseas. Most people don't understand that this one pipeline coming through this local area and the one a bit further south, the Mountain Valley Pipeline, is part of this massive infrastructure, this huge build-out, which we simply can't let happen. If we want to have a sustainable future on this planet, if we let that happen on a global scale, it's pretty catastrophic to the future of humanity on this planet. So it's that message of, yeah, we got to stop these pipelines from destroying our local environment, but just painting the bigger picture that we can't do this. Once we put these pipelines in place, they're going to be around for decades, and that what the impact that's going to have, the carbon, the methane that's going to be released into the atmosphere, it's pretty bad. It's pretty catastrophic stuff. But it starts on the local level. We have to act. We have to step up. It's our responsibility as concerned citizens of this country or earthlings on this planet.
We're fighting an extraordinary, powerful enterprise, and really at its core, we're fighting things that are built so hard baked into our legal system and our society and the incentives that are there, that you recognize when you get into this that it's not really about the Atlantic Coast Pipeline. That's a symptom of a much, much bigger problem, and it's going to take all of us to turn it around.